Boom. Bruce Hill, new skills, new you. And I actually got slides this time. I'm proud of myself. I hate making slides. And so I might doctor them up a little bit. The recording is available for purchase afterwards, but it's always nice to hop in live because then you can ask questions, right? So today's topic is discipline is simple, all right? Discipline is simple. So we're going to cover three things. What is discipline and why it's important? And of course, how do we use it, right? Because new skills, new you isn't about just learning about new skills. It's about implementing them. It's about practicing it. That's where the change comes in. So the first thing, when I say simple, simple ain't easy. I'm sure it's Tuesday, right? Monday, maybe we survived barely by the skin of our teeth, as the country folks say, and our to-do list may be longer than we started earlier in the week, right? There's things that were on there that didn't get checked off, that we meant to do, supposed to do, didn't feel like doing. And we know what we're supposed to do, and we even know how to do it a lot of the times, but we don't always do it. So when I say discipline is simple, absolutely, absolutely is. I don't ever want to mislead you that it is easy, but it's worth it, right? So let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. Discipline is the practice of making people obey rules or standard of behavior. Now, that actually is a really close synonym to like punishment, right? You're in trouble, you get disciplined. And as I was researching, that's not really what we're talking about, right? That's not the discipline we're talking about. I don't want to force you to make the changes in your life. How do we make those changes for ourselves? So I kept looking. I like this one a little bit better. Discipline is consistency of action. So that means we're doing things the right way each time, every time. But that's still not really, I don't know, when I think of discipline, that's not really what I come up with. Consistency is consistency, right? So discipline being consistency of action, I feel like we're getting warmer, but not quite there. And that's when I realized it's self-discipline. It's really, when we talk about discipline, most of the time we're referring to self-discipline. And that's very simply the ability to control yourself. That's a lot different than the first definition of making people obey the rules or standard behavior. Because let's be honest, if we had someone to make us do the things we're supposed to do, we wouldn't need self-discipline, right? We had someone standing over our shoulders all the time and making sure we ate well, we exercised, we saved money, we woke up on time, whatever it is you're trying to accomplish, life will be a lot easier. Maybe not as much fun, but it will work. So really, when we talk about discipline, we're going to focus on self-discipline, like taking care of what I need to do when I need to do it. All right. So with that calibration, self-discipline that's the secret. That's one of the 5 skills, just real quick. Confidence, that's the #1 skill anybody can learn. Sales, fantastic skill for everyone to learn. Communication, we use it every day. So if you get good at it, that'll change your life. And listening, a lot of people don't know how to listen. They think just because their mouth isn't moving, they're listening. But maybe we'll talk about that next week. And last but certainly not least is self-discipline. Those 5 skills, if you put them into practice, game changer. It'll set you ahead of your peers in any age or walk of life you're in. So self-discipline is what we're going to focus on. And we'll call it discipline for short. I like this definition as well. When I kind of looked at some motivational talks and some quotes, it says discipline is doing what you need to do versus what you feel like doing. Okay, because January 1st is going to roll around. There's 109 days left in the year, right? We're going to have those New Year's resolutions. It's New Year's, new you. And 5 a.m. shows up. If you're a little hungover, you had a few too many mimosas, right? Champagne's still kicking in your system. 5 a.m. shows up and you don't feel like doing whatever it is you said you were going to do. Whether that's exercising, you're like, it's 5 a.m. Whether it's eating different. Now you're hungover. I know we all have that spot, that favorite food we like to eat in the mornings. I was a big Waffle House fan when I lived in Georgia, and I still am. But is that consistent with my goals? Maybe not, depending on the goal. So discipline is doing what I need to do versus what I feel like doing. One definition is a little bit more wordy, but basically it goes with discipline is the practice of committing to the action, even when the feeling that you had when you made the decision had gone, right? So the feeling's gone, but now the action is here. Now it's time to execute. Discipline is pushing through that. So very similar to this one. But it's tough. If we don't feel like doing it, where does that discipline come from? Well, I got some good news and some bad news. No one's born with discipline. No one's born with self-discipline. Actually, maybe the opposite. I don't know if any of y'all listening have kids. Kids do whatever, whenever. You have to be that disciplined because they don't have self-discipline. And that's a really subtle way to differentiate the two. Discipline is usually on the outside. Self-discipline comes from inside. So the bad news is you're not born with it. But the good news is because you're not born with it, it means we can learn it. It means we can practice it and we can get better at it. Okay. So how do we do that? First, we've got to figure out something. Comfort is the enemy of discipline. Well, we ask ourselves, man, why can't I commit to saving money? Why can't I commit to, hey, I want to travel more, but maybe you're a little nervous to leave the country. What else? Maybe you've been meaning to write a book. Maybe you've been meaning to read a book, and you're too busy. There's a lot in your mind. You're tired. You can't concentrate. Can't focus. There's so many things that interrupt us from whatever our goal is, and we don't have that self-discipline to get us through. One of the biggest challenges is comfort. A lot of times it's easier. Remember, I said discipline is simple, but it's not easy. Sometimes it's easier to just do what we've already been doing. A lot of times it's easier to just maintain normal, the average. And those can be really dangerous words for someone who wants to evolve, who wants to grow, who wants some new you. And that's a beautiful thing about discipline. You don't have to wait to New Year's to create a new you, right? It's almost become cliche at this point. It's a new year, new me. Woo. You can start practicing these skills today. So here's one thing that gets in the way is comfort. What do I mean? Well, let's go back to the example. You want to start working out, say, hey, I'm going to get fit. I want to get back to, my college weight or whatever the case may be. But your bed's real comfy at 5 a.m., right? It's dark outside still, depending on the time of the year, it might be cold, and you're warm and safe under the blankets. That's a tough one. So I'm gonna copy Mel Robbins. Shout out to the 5-second rule. She says, whenever you are in front of an action, right? You say, I really need to do blank. She says, count down from 5, right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just do it. And it's really important that you count down, not up, because it's finite, right? Eventually you get to 0, you got to execute. And that's a good place to start practicing self-discipline. It's a really simple mantra that you can use on a daily basis. And I don't feel like washing the dishes. Hey, I'm going to wash the dishes now. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and get started. Mix water, wash 1 or 2, then go put on your podcast, then go put on some music, then go put on your TV show and get back to it while the water's still warm, right? Whereas a lot of times it's the other way. We'll say, well, I'm going to take a break first. I'm going to eat first. I just got home from work. I need to shower first. Let me just catch up on this episode. And next thing I know, right, I'm ordering takeout because I don't have any dishes. So comfort is the enemy of discipline. I'm not saying you need to remove all the comforts, tear out your air conditioning, rip up all the carpets and wear burlap sacks. That's not what I'm saying. I am telling you, this is where you can watch out for if you ever find yourself like, man, I really meant to work out yesterday. I really meant to eat better yesterday. I really meant to get to bed earlier, whatever the case may be. This is probably one of the things that's in the way. If you can identify that, they can help you overcome it. Okay. All right. Moving on. Oh, you aren't lazy. You're undisciplined. This is huge. This is huge. Shout out to therapy for helping put this together. A lot of times we say things like, I need to blank. I really should blank. And when you have sentences like that, it creates an obligation. And if you don't fulfill it, it creates guilt. So it's like a downward spiral. So you say, man, I really should wash those dishes. And then you don't, and you feel guilty, you feel ashamed, and you're just beating yourself up. So a shift in language is not saying you're lazy. It's not saying even I should wash the dishes. Like, hey, I want a clean house, and washing the dishes is a step to do that. And being honest with yourself. Now, look, if you worked a 14-hour day, I have some friends that are nurses. That happens way too often. I don't want them to think they're lazy for not coming off a 14-hour shift and washing the dishes. But the language is important. And this is part of the self-discipline, right? Managing yourself. Say, hey, look, I am tired. I am making a choice not to wash these dishes right now. And that's so subtle, but it's really freeing. It's really liberating, because now, instead of feeling lazy or ashamed or guilty, you say, hey, I'm making a conscious choice based on what I need. So here's the catch on the other side. So now you come off the shift, you get a good night's rest. Now we start saying things like, well, I had a hard day yesterday. I'm going to take it easy today. Now you're like, well, I've got some other things I need to do. Maybe they're not really important. I need to rearrange the books on my bookshelf. So you got to be careful for those distractions. But I also want you to give yourself some credit for what you do, and realize that if you're putting in the time and effort, you're probably not lazy. We've just got to work on that self-discipline. All right. I hope that helps somebody remove some of that guilt. So we've got the definition. What is discipline? We talked about why it's so hard to practice self-discipline. Well, how do we build self-discipline? Well, we talked real quickly about the 5-second rule, not putting it off till later. Or we talked about positive self-talk. But one more action item that I really like is to have a big dream. Have a big dream. People usually change for one or two reasons. It'll either be something traumatic happens, and usually those are negative things emotionally, or over time, very gradually. And so self-discipline works in both directions. I don't think this happens. I don't know. You don't go to bed at 200 pounds and wake up in the morning 7 8 hours later at 400 pounds. It doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time, right? And so small decisions. You're working 2 jobs and it's just easier to grab fast food on the way home. You're sitting at a desk all day, right? And so 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, you're like, man, where did this waistline come in? Why don't my clothes fit? Now, what does it have to do with having a dream? Because it's not going to happen overnight in the other direction. So, hey, 400 pounds, I need to get a healthier weight for my health. We're not trying to make the cover of Cosmopolitan or anything like that's health, right? What else? Hey, I want to save more money. I want to pay off my credit cards. Whatever the action is, the bigger picture, the big dream is why that action is important to you. What does it have to do with discipline? Well, when it's 5 a.m. and your bed is warm and cozy, you don't want to work out, you have to have a big dream. In your head, you're like, man, I know that this is important. I want to see my kids grow up. I want to see my grandkids grow up, right? I got to be healthy for them. That's a bigger dream. That's more than just, I need to go to the gym, right? There's that obligation again. Now you say, man, I want to go to the gym because that's in line with my goal. That's in line with my priorities to have a healthy lifestyle, lead by example for my family, for my kids, and so I can see my grandkids grow up, right? So now when I say, hey, I want to save money, okay, that's kind of boring. Why do you want to save money? And I really want to take a big trip next year, all expenses included, resort in another country, somewhere I got to get my passport out, right? That's a big dream. So now if someone says, hey, we're going to go to brunch again, maybe once a month is okay. We're going to go to brunch again. We just went to brunch yesterday. So now it's easier to say no to brunch at this moment because you're like, no, I'm planning that trip to Punta Cana next year, right? I want to spend some time backpacking Europe. You've got to have a big dream. That's what's going to keep you going when you don't feel like it. Now, you got the big dream in your head, but it might feel far away. It might feel a little bit out of reach. Some days, the engine light on the car comes in, you got a flat tire, the brakes are making a noise they're not supposed to be making, and Punta Cana feels far away. Okay. You had to work a double shift at work, and that trip to the gym just feels so difficult. Well, this is the second most important thing. I used to have this first, but the dreams got to come first. You got to take small steps. Just like you don't end up in debt, you don't end up with a low credit score, you don't end up overweight overnight. It doesn't happen in just a few hours, minutes time. It happens gradually. Well, we can use that same process in a positive direction for our lives and take small steps. So that might mean going to brunch once a month instead of every weekend, right? That might mean doing some jumping jacks at home, maybe some squats at home if you can't make it to the gym. That might mean cutting a credit card physically in half, but you don't close it, right? So it's more difficult to spend the money on that card. Just some small step that's going to get you closer to your goal, whatever that looks like. You've got this big dream in your head. You're not going to accomplish it overnight, but that's not to discourage you. That's just to remind you to be gentle with yourself. So taking those small steps can be a positive action. It can be inspirational to you. It can help create motivation. That's a fun thing. The action creates the motivation. So those small steps can help you build momentum. That can help you keep going. You're like, man, it snowed outside. I don't want to go for a run. But you know what? I'm going to work out. I'm going to turn on my Billy Blanks tape and I'm going to work out in the living room, right? I'm going to take a small step. I won't do nothing. I'm going to keep moving forward, even if it's just a little bit. That was huge for me and my self-discipline. One of my favorite accomplishments is I read 52 books a year. And that's been a practice for the past 3 or 4 years. And one thing that I really like about, not just what I learned, is the discipline. It's the self-discipline I practice along the way, because you can't accidentally read 52 books. You can't wait till Christmas, right? It's December 25th and cram a bunch of books. I don't want to just flip pages. I really want to absorb that information so I can live it and so I can teach it. So what I did was I had to work backwards. I said, okay, most books have about 210 pages. And I know that I can read about 30 pages in 30 minutes. And so I did the math. I said, well, look, if I read 30 pages today and I read 30 pages every day, in 7 days, 7 times 30 is 210. In 7 days, I can read one book. That's 1 week, one book. All right. So now let's zoom out. Let's fast forward to the end of the year. Hey, there's 52 weeks in a year. I read 52 books. It almost becomes easy. It's simple. Simple isn't always easy. And that's what I mean about taking small steps, not trying to hold yourself responsible to read 52 books. Like, man, I can't even imagine that. Most Americans don't even read one book a year after they graduate high school. No shade, it's just not it. So that's where small steps can be life-changing and can make big differences. Here's the thing. Discipline is like pushing a car. Now, if you haven't experienced this, I hope you never do. But if your car dies, the battery runs out of gas, whatever the case may be, you got to push it. You got to push it. You got to get out of the road until you can get a tow truck there. So you start pushing the car. It takes a lot of effort and energy. But once it starts rolling, it's not so hard. You just got to keep going. It's easier to keep the car going than it is to get it moving. So if you're ever in that situation, just remember that the hard part is getting it moving. Once that, just keep going. Even if you slow down, as long as those wheels keep turning, it's almost easy. But if you let it stop, then you got to start the whole process over again. And that's the way it is with self-discipline. So those small steps, keep it moving. Remember, consistency beats intensity. A lot of people start real strong that first week, right? They're eating salads. They're at the gym 7 days a week. They're spending $0, right? They're thrifting all their clothes, whatever the case may be. They're very intense, but it's not always sustainable. They get worn out. They get frustrated because they're not seeing any progress. And it's just too different for what they were used to doing just last week. So I want to remind you, once you have your big dream, oh, and I have my little notebook, I write it down every day. Let's see here, there you go. It's got my name on it. I write down my dream every day when I wake up and every day before I go to sleep. And that helps me be consistent when I don't feel as intense. Helps me keep those small steps in mind, helps me practice self-discipline. So I'm going to stop here. You gotta join us live every Tuesday, 8 p.m. Eastern. And I will have the slides available in the recording for download, but I'm going to stop here for our Q&A. So if you have some questions that you want to answer, you got to tap in. Tell a friend, join us next week. The link's in the bio at New Skills New You on Instagram. Thanks for joining us. I hope that helps someone build some self-discipline.